Hey Five Spokes, today we're going to talk about how we as instructors can help our riders make smart decisions throughout the ride. And I want to share quickly why we're going to talk about this and what really was the catalyst for this conversation. So I was traveling a couple of weeks ago and I rode with a very skilled instructor. And there was like 30 bikes. I sat in the back of the room, which I love to do because I like to watch all the riders. And there was this one particular woman I really zeroed in on. The instructor laid out like a 3-minute climb challenge, and throughout that 3 minutes, and it wasn't excessive, she was challenging riders to add just a little bit more gear, a little bit more intensity on the wheel. And I saw this woman, and she was so determined, but when she added, I could tell by like the second or third add, she had added so much resistance that her form completely broke down. She was sucking wind, but she had this determination about her because she's looking at the instructor, she's listening. You can tell, like, I want to do this. Every time the instructor says, add a little more, can you challenge yourself? She did it. And when I shared that with Pam, she said, oh gosh, that's that misfire of communication where the instructor is laying something out. It sounds smart, it sounds right. She's challenging you or he's challenging you. But the way the rider hears it and the way the rider makes decisions about what the instructor's laying out there can break down because there's so much around that. So we wanted to have a conversation about that because I found those nuggets, as always, that you share with me to be so helpful.
Yeah, and I think there is a big crevasse, or there's a big gap between, and our job as instructors is to challenge riders. But we don't have an individual conversation with each rider, so it's hard for us to know and to help them to make smart choices. So they're trying to do what we ask them to do and to get a challenging workout. But the idea of challenge is really based on their perception of not only what you're asking them to do, but what they have available, how much energy they have available to meet that challenge.
Definitely.
And their assessment, their accurate assessment of that energy that they have available is their perceived rate of exertion. And RPE is something that I know there's a lot written about, but I think there's a lot of confusion too in terms of how the instructor can help communicate clearly what level of exertion is going to be asked of the riders throughout the ride, and then also giving riders a lot more information around how they assess how much energy they have available, because that perception determines the quality of their movement. That perception, that accurate assessment as accurately as possible based on a lot of sensory feedback is going to determine the quality of their movement. And of course we want them to challenge themselves, but you don't want form breaking down like what you were describing, because then that's no longer training. We're built for work, but too much work and too little work is both detrimental. It's not helping us meet our goals. What's the goal is really important to help people determine is what the appropriate load is for each effort. And that's tricky stuff.
It is tricky stuff and that's why I loved our conversation, because so often RPE, it's like, RPE, it's the chart, it's the words, and all important, and we know that. Mm-hmm. But when we really started talking about the complexity around, well, how do you perceive accurately what's happening? And you talked about all those factors and the great reminders. So the external and the internal.
Yep. So what rating of perceived exertion is this sensory feedback that it's someone's internal landscape about how hard their muscles are working, the actual physical exertion. But coupled with that is the psychological piece of how motivated am I, and am I able to identify as clearly and as accurately as possible what I have to bring to this challenge, and and pace myself throughout the entire ride.
Yeah.
Knowing that all that sensory feedback, yes, it's coming from muscles and joints and breath. Those are kind of the most obvious ones.
Yeah.
The ones that I think a lot of people aren't really aware of, and instructors would do a great service helping people to understand the load of life, because exercise is a stressor. And there's also internal or personal stressors, the other factors, psychological stressors, social stressors.
True.
That affect someone's ability to bring it.
So so when you say like social factors, like that, you've said that before, and I find that really interesting, because at first I was like, social factors, but think about, right, then I thought, here you are in the room, so, even though it's dark, and even though we can say 100 times, like, no one's really paying attention to what you do except your instructor, keep you safe, no one's judging you, I know it's really hard for people to think, well, you can say that, but if I slow down, or I don't do the standing climb, or I don't do whatever, people are going to know that, or think less, or judge me, or think I'm a slacker. And so that's a social factor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it starts to take away from their performance and their ability to accurately judge, what it is they're doing and how they're doing it.
Yeah. And a lot of times people are so self-critical. It may not even be the people in the room.
Yeah, true.
Hopefully people come to work out together so that the social environment is one that picks them up. And perhaps, we rise to a higher level of achievement in the circle of other people. But a lot of times we end up feeling bad, inside. Like that woman that you're describing, maybe she felt like, oh my gosh, if I don't add this other load, I'm a slacker.
Exactly.
And so what's really important is to help people identify the subjective, atmosphere or environment inside their internal landscape, and subjective right here, right now. So that means the temperature in the room can be a factor. The smells that are in the room can be a factor.
Totally.
And the external environment, obviously, but also what else is happening, in their life. How motivated are they? How fresh are they? How well rested are they? Have they been hydrating? Because most times people are slightly dehydrated, and that really affects performance. So then they have this instructor asking them to add 3 more resistance loads and make this really hard. It's rich to help have an instructor give words around your assessment of how much exertion and how much effort you can bring to this next challenge. Is a wide variety of things go into assessing that, and being really aware of, am I on medications? How late, is my, have I just moved? Should I be on meds? Am I going through a separation? Is my boss driving me crazy? How many errands have I done with my kids? All of that factors in, and that is a very individual and very important, assessment to make in terms of bringing the exertion.
And I think of that when you describe that, it's like a Venn diagram is what I picture.
All these little
where so you've got the circle that the instructor is laying out the challenge, right, the exertion, and then you have the circle, right, that is these external factors as well as the internal landscape. And when you overlay, on that diagram, that piece in the middle there, that's a lot going on, and that's the sweet spot, right? So the instructor is primarily focused on, it's the profile, it's cueing, it's the coaching, it's this, and the person is like, all those factors you just said, the meds, the day, the boss, the work, plus any injuries, lack of sleep, all that stuff, plus the emotional piece that we talked about of, like, that woman, the way I was perceiving her was she just wanted so much to do what that instructor was laying out there. That instructor had huge respect. You could see it. boy, by God, she was going to do those 4 ads come hell or high water. And with a disregard for, like Pam described, that internal landscape, right? She could have hit that second turn, and if she had that awareness,
Bam.
right, been like, I'm here and I'm going to stay, so I'm not doing those 2 added turns.
Mm-hmm.
Or she could had the confidence, really, to back some of that off and think, no, I'll back a little of this off and I'll hit those other those things. So the other piece that I wonder what's happening with that rider is judgment, right? So we start to judge our performance. And so often, especially if we're tired, that judgment tends to be negative, right? So your instructor's cueing you to, with a challenge, and you feel like, I'm not meeting that challenge. And then your inner dialogue starts in, right? Like, I'm not good at climbing. I'm terrible out of the saddle. I'm exhausted.
Blah, blah, blah.
And right? And so by the end, right, there's 10 minutes left in the ride, and you're defeated, right?
Yeah.
Or, as you pointed out, it can go the other way too, where, you're like, I'm a rock star, I'm killing it, I'm giving 1,000%, but, and maybe you shouldn't be. Or maybe you think you're giving 1,000% because you don't have enough resistance on, or whatever. So it's that judgment piece.
Yeah, and being okay. So this subjective piece of helping people really identify everything that goes into assessing their internal landscape, but being okay with what is hard. So not confusing that with the physical load, because then they start to look at, if you have numbers, then they're like, well, I did 200 watts yesterday, and I don't understand why, and all of a sudden that downward spiral happens.
Yes.
The subjective assessment of what you're bringing to the bike today is different day by day, right? So we all come in with some different experiences in our back pocket. It's like it sticks to us, and you just can't rub them off, and that does affect when fatigue, especially, settles in. It's important to identify. Sometimes you have to work through fatigue. We don't have a choice, but when you're training, if you always do that, that's a problem. That's probably an inaccurate assessment of potentially overtraining. So it's really important to identify the strain, the heaviness, the fatigue, the breathlessness, and being aware of so many sensations that are really that idea of presence to a wide variety of sensations. They're always flowing at every effort. And being okay with, this is hard right here, right now. I don't need to bust an eyeball and pop a vein just because everybody else in the room seems to be. Or my instructor.
And I love that, what you say, like that constant flowing of all of these sensations. So, we're talking about how in a ride, and you've got this 4,000 to 6,000, I think, revolutions per minute, or whatever, some crazy high number. And that wheel is constantly turning. It's similar to just so much information, data, internal, external, that you're processing in nanoseconds, and then trying to make decisions around it. And then you bring it back to the instructor, and it's like, wow, I'm just trying to deliver my profile here, but I have to think of all that too. And so I would love if you would share the story you were telling me about. I think it's perfect reflection of this, the wording and how your writers responded to that, because I think it really wraps what we're talking about.
Rating of perceived exertion is hard, and I always ask in the beginning of every class, how's your body feeling today? What are your energy levels like today? They may or may not answer me, but the posing of the question starts to tease apart, like, a little scan. And this particular ride, it's called Fire and Ice. It's a standard classic interval ride, 1-to-1 ratio. So this was 30 minutes. It was a 5-minute warm-up, and then 4 minutes of hard, 4 minutes to reload, 3 minutes of hard, 3 minutes to reload, 2 minutes hard, 2 minutes to reload, and then 1 minute hard, 1 minute to reload 3 times. So 1 minute, 1 minute, 1 minute. It was a total of 12 minutes of hard work, and 12 minutes of recovery chopped up into a pyramid, basically 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 1.
Love that.
So the way I worked it in the beginning of the ride, during the warm-up, after saying, thanks so much for coming in, how do your bodies feel today, what are your energy levels like, here's what I have in mind, and want you to assess accordingly, but the first 4 minutes is hard. Laid out the 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 1. Then I said, do you all agree that for 1 minute, you can probably work harder than the 4 minutes? And everybody was like, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was our challenge, was to set the bar for the 4 minutes. And then the goal was to maintain that same level of work. So the idea of exertion, I love that one instructor here, she referred to it as rating of perceived exhaustion.
Okay. RPE,
Yeah.
rating of perceived exhaustion.
And I think it really, it is an expression that is often confused because it's not about exhausting people.
Yeah, exertion doesn't equal exhaustion.
No, but some efforts are exhausting.
Yes.
And understanding
But
when,
not all efforts are.
No. So it's helping people understand what is heavy and hard,
Yep.
what is not,
Yep.
and then what is hard relative to another
Bingo.
effort.
Bingo.
Because there's different things that happen in their bodies.
And that's why the word relativity, that's key, right?
Huge.
And that's what I loved
Huge.
about. So 4 minutes, when you said, we can agree that you can work harder for 1 minute than 4 minutes, yes? Yes. And it sounds so obvious, but I bet your riders were like, oh.
So they needed to still pace.
Okay.
They had
Yep.
They had an objective. They had a goal.
Yep.
But they still needed to make smart choices by the end of the ride because
Right.
some people were fresher than others.
That's right.
That doesn't mean they're going to come in here fresh every single day.
Right.
They still were able to meet their goals because they
Yep.
made smart choices based on their assessment and my clear description of where I want to go today. And that made
That 4 is different than 3.
Yeah.
2 is different than 3.
Right.
And 1 is different than 2.
Yeah.
Right? And even those 1, 1, 1s, right?
Yeah.
The first one might feel different than that last 1 minute effort. And it resonated with them, yeah?
Oh, they
Yeah,
loved it.
they loved
Two of them said it was the hardest ride, hardest 30 minutes that they've ever done.
That's so cool. That's so cool. And the other thing is that I know for me personally, to your point, we have watts, we have meters, we have all this, but I tend to forget that language, that coaching.
So important.
Right, that isn't just, the words around the RPE chart. It's what you did. It's talking about that relativity in terms that just simple, bam, people can understand that, 4 and 1, something like that. So, I love it.
Hope this was helpful.
Thanks, Fives folks.
Stay awesome.
awesome.